They laughed at the beggar on stage, but he surprised everyone. When the stage lights came on, an awkward silence fell over the auditorium. The man who had just climbed the unsteady steps carried a guitar as battered as his clothes, and his smell reached the front rows of the audience. The laughter started quietly, then spread like fire. The show's host discreetly covered his nose while stepping back a few paces. One of the judges, singer Kimberly White, turned her face with a grimace the cameras captured perfectly. The man stood still at center stage, holding the guitar against his chest like a shield, his brown eyes scanning the hundreds of faces watching him with contempt. "And what's your name, friend?" the host asked with a forced smile, keeping his distance. "Arthur. Arthur Miller," the man replied, his hoarse voice cracking into the microphone. "And what are you going to perform for our judges today, Arthur?" "A song I wrote a long time ago. It's called Stars I Can No Longer See." More laughter. Someone in the audience shouted something about taking a shower first. Judge Stephen Brooks, a music producer known for his sharp comments, already had his hand over the red elimination button. Arthur adjusted the guitar, running his calloused, dirty fingers over the strings in an almost reverent gesture, and began to play. The first notes silenced the auditorium in a way no request for quiet ever could. The melody was simple but carried an emotion that seemed to seep through the strings of the old instrument. When Arthur began to sing, his voice transformed completely. It was no longer hoarse or broken. It was deep, in tune, full of pain and beauty. Backstage, inside the technical control booth, a woman in her mid-40s dropped the clipboard she was holding. Sarah Thompson, the show's assistant director, went white as a sheet. Her eyes fixed on the monitor showing the close-up of Arthur's face, that face she knew so well despite the long beard and years of suffering etched into every wrinkle. "Sarah, are you okay?" asked Mike, the production coordinator beside her. She didn't answer. Her legs gave way and she had to lean on the control console. That man on stage was her father, the father who had abandoned the family 26 years ago when she was just 16. The father who left home one morning saying he was going to work and never came back. On stage, Arthur kept singing, unaware of the drama unfolding backstage. The lyrics spoke of a person who looked at the sky every night, searching for stars they could no longer see, stars that represented everything they had lost. His voice rose and fell with impeccable technique, each note loaded with genuine feeling. Kimberly White, the judge who had grimaced minutes earlier, now had tears streaming down her face. She couldn't take her eyes off the ragged man who was turning that stage into something sacred. Beside her, Mr. Anthony Sterling, a veteran composer of 70 years, closed his eyes and slowly nodded, recognizing true art when he heard it. The song came to an end with a long, painful note that echoed through the silent auditorium. For 3 seconds that felt like an eternity. No one moved. Then the audience exploded into applause. It wasn't a polite ovation. It was a roar of pure emotion, people getting up from their seats, clapping hard, some openly crying. Arthur lowered his head, pressing the guitar against his chest. His shoulders trembled. He wasn't used to so much attention, to so much noise that wasn't mocking. "That was—" Kimberly tried to speak, but her voice faltered. She wiped her tears and tried again. "That was the most beautiful thing I've heard in years." "Where did you get that song from?" "From the deepest place a person can go," Arthur replied simply. Stephen Brooks, the judge known for being tough, leaned back in his chair and ran his hand over his face. When he spoke, his voice was different, without his usual arrogance. "I've been in this industry for 30 years. I've produced hundreds of artists, and I can say with absolute certainty that you have something that can't be taught, can't be bought. You have soul, my friend. Your music has soul." Mr. Anthony Sterling nodded, holding the microphone with hands that trembled slightly. "In all my career, I've heard thousands of songs, many technically perfect but empty. What you just did here wasn't a performance. It was a confession. It was pure truth." He paused, his eyes glistening. "Where are you from, Arthur? How did a talent like this end up—" He hesitated, searching for the right words. "On the streets?" Arthur finished without bitterness. "It's a long story, sir. A story I spent a long time trying to forget." Backstage, Kimberly finally regained control of her legs and ran out of the booth. Mike followed her, worried, shouting her name through the hallways. She didn't stop. She needed to get to him, needed to confirm she wasn't going crazy, that really was her father. On stage, the 3 judges voted unanimously to move Arthur forward to the next round. The host, now much more respectful, shook the contestant's hand and guided him backstage. It was there, in the narrow hallway behind the stage, that father and daughter came face to face for the first time in over 2 decades. Arthur stopped mid-step when he saw her. His eyes widened, the guitar nearly slipping from his hands. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Kimberly stood frozen 3 yards away, her face twisted between anger, shock, and something that could have been relief. "Sadie?" His voice came out as a broken whisper. "My Sadie." "Don't call me that," she replied, and the coldness in her voice was like ice. "You lost that right 26 years ago." Arthur took a step toward her, reaching out a trembling hand. Kimberly recoiled as if he might burn her. "Sweetheart, I'm not your daughter, not anymore." The words came out sharp, but her voice trembled. "You abandoned us, you abandoned me, you abandoned James, you abandoned Mom. You walked out that door and never came back. Never called, never sent word, nothing. We thought you had—" She stopped, swallowing hard. "We thought you were out there somewhere, happy with another family, having forgotten us." "No, it wasn't like that," Arthur tried to explain, tears beginning to stream down his dirt-covered face. "I never forgot. There wasn't a single day that I didn't think about you." "Then why?" Kimberly exploded, all the anger accumulated over years pouring out at once. "Why did you leave? Why did you never come back? We needed you. I needed you. I was 16 years old, Dad. 16. Mike and other crew members began to gather, realizing something intense was happening. The show's host also appeared, along with one of the production assistants. Everyone kept a respectful distance, but clearly curious. Arthur tried to approach again, but Kimberly raised her hand in a stop gesture. "No, you're not allowed to come near me." She took a deep breath, trying to control the emotions threatening to overwhelm her. "What are you doing here? How did you have the nerve to audition for this show?" "I didn't know you worked here, Sadie. I swear I didn't know." "And if you had known, you wouldn't have come? You would have kept hiding?" "I never hid. I just got lost. And when I tried to come back, it was already too late. I had become this." He gestured to himself, to his torn clothes, his dirty beard, his smell. "How could I show up in front of you like this? How could I look your mother in the eye, look you in the eye, knowing I had failed you both in every possible way? So you chose to walk out on us for good. What a noble solution," Sarah said with bitter sarcasm. The show's director, Charles Harrison, appeared in the hallway at that moment, sizing up the scene with the eyes of a predator that had just caught the scent of blood. "What's going on here?" he asked, but from the gleam in his eyes he was already calculating how to turn it into content. "None of your business," Sarah replied quickly, trying to protect the privacy of a moment that was already painful enough. "Sarah has worked for me for 8 years, Charles said, looking from one to the other, "and this contestant clearly knows her." "That's interesting." "It's not interesting, it's personal," she cut in. "Everything that happens on this show is my business," Charles shot back, "especially when it involves my staff and my contestants." Arthur, who had remained silent during the exchange, finally spoke, his voice weak but steady. "She's my daughter, I'm her father. A terrible father, a father who made unforgivable mistakes, but still I'm her father." The silence that followed was heavy. Charles began to smile slowly, and Sarah felt her stomach drop. She knew that smile. It was the smile he wore when he saw a golden opportunity to boost ratings. "This is perfect," Charles murmured, more to himself than to the others. A lost father reuniting with his daughter through the show. The audience is going to love it. "No," Sarah said firmly. "You're not going to use this. You're not going to turn this into entertainment. Are you telling me how to do my job, Sarah? I'm telling you to respect my privacy, and his too." He signed up for a national television show. He agreed to have his life exposed, Charles argued. "And you work here, it's part of the business." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and hit like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Sarah looked at her father, searching for support, but Arthur was staring at the ground, looking smaller than ever. She realized at that moment how much he had shrunk, not just physically, but in spirit. The father she remembered was tall, confident, always with a smile on his face. The man in front of her was a shadow, bent under the weight of years she couldn't even begin to imagine. "I need to go," Sarah said abruptly, turning to leave. "Sadie, wait!" Arthur called out, but she was already walking quickly down the hall. He tried to follow her, but Mike, the production coordinator, gently blocked his path. "I think you should give her some space, man. She needs to process this." Arthur nodded slowly, defeated. He looked at the guitar in his hands as if it were the only solid thing in a world that had just been turned upside down. Charles watched it all with calculating interest, then gave orders to Mike. "I want you to find out everything about this man. Where he lives, if he lives anywhere. How long he's been on the streets. What happened to make him end up like this. Everything." "Charles, Sarah is not going to like this," Mike tried to argue. "Sarah is an employee, and as such, she's going to do what's best for the show." Charles turned to Arthur. "As for you, Mr. Arthur, welcome to American Stars. You'll be staying at a hotel with the other contestants until the next round. We'll take care of everything you need." Arthur shook his head slowly. "I don't want any of this. I just wanted to sing my song." "That's it." "You sang your song, and it was brilliant. Now you're going to get the chance to sing so much more." Charles placed his hand on Arthur's shoulder, ignoring the smell. "You could be a star, my friend. A true star." "I don't want to be a star. I just want—" Arthur stopped, not knowing how to finish the sentence. What did he want? His daughter back? His life back? Impossible. Everything was impossible. 2 hours later, Arthur found himself in a hotel room for the first time in over 2 decades. The room was shared with 3 other contestants from the show. When he walked in, carrying only his guitar and a plastic bag with his few belongings, the 3 men already there stopped talking and stared at him. "That's the bum who killed it on stage today," said one of them, a guy around 25 with neatly combed hair. "I saw you on the TV in the waiting room. It was incredible, man." "Thanks," Arthur muttered, not knowing where to look. "My name's Ryan." The guy extended his hand, but when Arthur stepped closer, he quickly pulled it back. "Oh, you know. Maybe you should take a shower first. No offense." The other 2 laughed. One of them, a middle-aged man named George, pointed to the bathroom. "There's a shower in there, and the production sent over some clothes for you. They're on the bed." Arthur looked at the indicated bed. There were shirts, pants, even new shoes. Everything simple but clean and in good condition. It had been so long since he'd had clothes that didn't come from donations or dumpsters. "You guys don't want me in this room," he said, not as a question, but as a statement. "It's nothing personal," answered the 3rd contestant, a heavy-set man named Stan. "But man, you gotta understand. The smell is really strong. We have to sleep here." Arthur nodded. He understood. He grabbed the clothes and headed to the bathroom. The shower was an almost spiritual experience, the hot water hitting his skin, washing away years of street grime. He stayed there for nearly an hour, scrubbing and scrubbing, trying to wash away not just the physical dirt, but also the shame, the pain, the regrets. Of course, it didn't work. Some stains don't come out with soap and water. When he came out of the bathroom, in clean clothes and his beard still long but washed, the other 3 contestants were watching TV. They barely looked at him. Arthur sat on his bed, picked up his guitar and began to play softly, just for himself. Not the song he'd performed on the show, but others. Old songs he used to play when his life still made sense. That's when George asked, without taking his eyes off the TV, "What was a guy with that much talent doing on the streets? It doesn't make sense." Arthur stopped playing. "Life doesn't always make sense. But like you're really good. You should be rich, famous. Instead, you were sleeping under bridges." "I wasn't under bridges. I was in shelters. Sometimes on church doorways. Sometimes in public squares," Arthur corrected, as if it made a difference. "Whatever. What I want to know is how you ended up there. Bad choices, one after another. Ryan turned over in bed to look at him. Like what? Drugs? Drinking? Not drugs. Drinking, yes. For a while. Arthur hesitated. It had been so long since he'd really talked to someone. But before the drinking, something else came first. The pride. The anger. The inability to ask for help when I needed it most. That doesn't explain anything, Stan commented, now also paying attention. Arthur looked at the guitar in his hands, the same hands that once taught his daughter to play her first notes, the same hands that once held his newborn son, the same hands that trembled holding the first bottle of moonshine, then the second, then so many, he lost count. I was a teacher, he began slowly. A music teacher at a private school. I had a good life, a family I loved. My wife Martha, my 2 children, Sarah and James. We weren't rich, but we were happy. I was happy. The 3 competitors were silent now, actually listening. One day they discovered musical instruments were missing from the school. They were expensive instruments, violins, flutes, a saxophone. The principal opened an investigation, and somehow, all the evidence pointed to me. Did you steal them? Ryan asked. No, but someone made it look like I did. Arthur ran his hand over his wet beard. To this day I don't know who it was. Maybe another teacher who wanted my position. Maybe the principal himself wanting to get rid of me for some reason. It doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that I lost my job. I lost my reputation. I tried to get work at other schools, but word had spread. Nobody wanted to hire a teacher accused of theft. But if you didn't do anything, you should have fought. You should have proven your innocence, George argued. With what money? With what lawyer? I could barely pay the bills at home. Arthur sighed heavily. I started drinking to deal with the anger, with the injustice. At first it was just 1 beer at the end of the day. Then it was 2, then 3, then I stopped counting. And your family? Martha tried to help me. My Sadie too. But I pushed them both away. I didn't want them to see me like that, weak, defeated. I started staying away from home, drinking in cheap dive bars, spending the little money Martha managed to make with her sewing work. Arthur paused, his voice growing thicker. One night, after an ugly fight, I left the house saying I was going to work. It was a lie. I didn't have a job. I went drinking. I drank so much I blacked out. When I woke up, I was in another neighborhood with no money, with nothing. I decided I couldn't go back home like that. I thought I'd find a quick job, save up some money, get myself together. Except that's not how it went. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. And the more time passed, the more impossible it seemed to go back. But 26 years, Stan said incredulously. 26 years without going back home? At first I still tried. I passed by the street a few times, looked through the window. I saw my wife working at the sewing machine late into the night. I saw my children growing up without me. But how could I knock on that door like that, drunk, stinking, a failure? I thought it would be better for them to think I had simply left than to see me destroyed. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, Ryan said, but his voice had no malice in it. It only had sadness. I know that now. But back then, it made sense to me. And the more time passed, the more impossible it became to go back. How do you explain 26 years of absence? How do you apologize for that? The room fell silent. On the television, a variety show kept playing, but no one was paying attention. And the music? George finally asked. Did you keep playing all this time? Yes. It was the only thing that kept me alive, I think. I played on the streets, in town squares, in front of subway stations. People tossed coins, sometimes bills, never much, but enough to eat, to get a spot in a shelter every now and then. The song you sang today, about the stars, was it about your family? Arthur nodded, unable to speak for a moment. I wrote songs for them, even knowing they'd never hear them. It was my way of, I don't know, of keeping the connection maybe, of not completely forgetting who I was before I lost myself. Ryan got up and walked over to the small refrigerator in the room. He grabbed a bottle of water and offered it to Arthur. Man, your story is heavy, but you know you can still fix things, right? Your daughter is here. She saw you. You can talk to her. You saw how she reacted. She hates me, and she has every right to." "She doesn't hate you," Stan said thoughtfully. "If she hated you, she wouldn't have gotten so emotional. The anger comes from wounded love. If she didn't love you, she wouldn't even care." Arthur wanted to believe that, but it was hard. The look on Sarah's face had been pure anger, pure resentment, and he couldn't blame her. He had stolen from her the years he should have been present. He couldn't give that back, no matter how many apologies he offered. That same night, on the other side of town, Sarah was sitting in the living room of her home, a small but comfortable apartment she shared with her husband, David. He was a gentle, 45-year-old man, a PE teacher, who had known her since college. He knew about her father, about the abandonment, about the pain it had caused. "He's alive," Sarah repeated for the 10th time, still trying to process it. All this time, he was alive and nearby. "Are you sure it was him?" David asked softly, sitting beside her on the couch. "I'm absolutely sure. He's aged, become unrecognizable in some ways, but the eyes are the same, and the voice. When he sang, it was exactly as I remembered from the lullabies he used to sing when I was little." "And what do you want to do?" Sarah rubbed her face with her hands. "I don't know. Part of me wants to run to him and hug him. Another part never wants to see him again in my life. And there's a part of me that just wants answers. Why? Why did he leave? Why did he never come back? Maybe he has reasons you don't know yet. What reasons could justify 26 years? Sarah stood up, too agitated to stay seated. "Mom nearly lost it when he disappeared. She worked 3 jobs to support us. I had to grow up way too fast, take care of James while she worked. We went hungry sometimes, David, really hungry, and he was out there somewhere playing guitar on the streets. Honey, I understand your anger." "No, you don't understand," she exploded. "You had a father who was present. You had a normal family. You don't know what it's like to grow up not knowing if your father is alive or dead, if he chose to leave, or if something bad happened to him. You don't know what it's like to see your mom crying in secret in the bathroom because she doesn't want you to see her weak." David stood up and tried to hug her, but she pulled away. She needed the anger right now. Anger was easier to handle than the jumble of feelings she was actually experiencing. "I need to call my mom. She needs to know." "Are you sure that's a good idea? It could be a huge shock for her. Would lying be better? Letting her find out by seeing the show on TV?" Sarah shook her head. "No, I need to tell her. And James, too." She picked up the phone with trembling hands. It was almost 10 at night. Her mother was usually already asleep by that hour, but this couldn't wait. She dialed the number and waited. 3 rings. 4. 5. "Hello?" Martha's sleepy voice answered. "Mom, it's me. Sorry to call so late, but I need to tell you something." "Sarah, what happened? Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Mom, but—" She took a deep breath. "I saw Dad today." Silence on the other end of the line. Such a deep silence that Sarah thought the call had dropped. "Mom, are you there?" "I'm here." Martha's voice came out shaky. "What did you say?" "I saw Dad. Arthur. He showed up on the show today as a contestant. He sang on stage and I recognized him." "That's not possible. You must have been mistaken. Arthur, he's—" Martha couldn't finish the sentence. "He's alive, Mom. And he's been on the streets all these years. He showed up on the show with torn clothes, smelling bad, carrying an old guitar. But it was him, I'm sure." Sarah heard a sound on the other end of the line, as if her mother were stifling a sob. "Did he ask about me? About James? Did he say anything?" "He tried to talk to me, but I couldn't listen. I was so angry, Mom. I still am." "Where is he now?" "At a hotel with the other contestants. The program hosts all of them until the next phase. I need to see him," Martha said, and Sarah could hear that she was crying now. "After so many years, I need to see him." "Mom, are you sure? He's not the man you remember anymore. He's destroyed. I don't care. He's the father of my children, I need to look into his eyes and know why he left us." "Okay, I'll get you the hotel address, but Mom, be prepared. It won't be easy seeing him like this." After hanging up, Sarah called her brother. James was 30 years old now, working as a manager at a musical instrument store. Ironically, he had followed in his father's footsteps without even truly knowing him. Everything he knew about Arthur was through the few stories his mother and sister told. "Sadie, what a surprise, you calling me so late," James answered, his voice cheerful as always. "James, I need to tell you something, and you better sit down." She explained everything again. James was silent for so long that she had to ask if he was still there. "I'm here," he finally said, "just trying to process it. Our father, the man I imagined dead all these years, showed up on a TV show. Yes. And he's alive, but he spent all that time on the streets? Yes. Damn, Sadie, I don't even know what this is." "I know, I don't either. Did you talk to him?" "Not really, I just yelled and walked away, and now?" "Now I don't know. Mom wants to see him. What about you?" James took a while to answer. "I don't know if I want to, Sadie. To me, he was always more of an idea than a real person, a ghost. And now finding out he was alive all this time, but never tried to reach out to us. I don't know how to feel about that." "I understand. But James, if you don't go, you might regret it later. I'm not saying forgive him or let him back into your life. I'm just saying maybe you need answers as much as I do. Let me think about it. I'll call you tomorrow." That night, none of them slept well. Sarah stayed awake next to David, staring at the ceiling, going over childhood memories. James sat on the living room couch, guitar in his lap, playing the songs his mother said his father used to play. Martha sat at the kitchen table, looking at an old photo she kept in a drawer, a wedding photo where she and Arthur smiled, young and full of hope. And Arthur, in the hotel room, stayed awake too, holding the guitar, playing softly so as not to disturb the others, playing the songs he had composed for his family, songs they had never heard, songs that held all the apologies he had never been able to say out loud. The next morning, the show's production team organized a meeting with all the contestants who had made it to the next phase. There were 20 people in all, including Arthur. Director Charles Harrison was there, along with some producers and Sarah, who tried to look professional despite the dark circles under her eyes. Charles explained the rules of the next phase. Each contestant would have to perform 2 songs, one of their choosing and one assigned by the production team. They would have a week to prepare. Those who performed best would move on to the semifinals. "And to help you prepare," Charles continued with a smile, "we're going to offer lessons with vocal, instrument and performance coaches. We want all of you to be at your best." After the meeting, while the other contestants left excitedly discussing their strategies, Arthur stayed behind. He saw Sarah organizing papers and hesitated, unsure whether he should approach. The decision was taken out of his hands when she looked in his direction and their eyes met. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Sarah swallowed hard and walked over to him. "We need to talk," she said, her voice carefully controlled. "Yes, we do," Arthur agreed. They went to an empty meeting room. Beatrice closed the door and turned to face him. In the daylight, she could see better how much he had changed. The eyes she remembered as bright now looked dim. The face she remembered as strong was thin and marked. But it was him. It was definitely him. "Why did you come back?" she asked without beating around the bush. "After all these years, why now?" "I didn't come back. I never really left. I've always been around." "Liar! If you were around, you would have come looking for us." "I did look. Many times. I just never had the courage to walk up to the door." "That doesn't make any sense." Arthur sat down in one of the chairs, looking exhausted. "It makes sense when you understand how ashamed I was, how much I hated myself for what I had done, for what I had become. So you preferred to leave us suffering, wondering if you were alive or dead, rather than swallow your pride and come back home. It wasn't pride, Sadie. It was shame. It was fear. It was the certainty that you would be better off without me than with the version of me I had become." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Beatrice sat down in the chair across from him but kept her distance. You have no idea what we went through. No idea. Mom nearly lost her mind looking for you. She went to police stations, hospitals, morgues. She spent the little money we had making flyers, hiring people to search for you. And you were out on the streets this whole time, able to come back at any moment? I'm sorry. The words came out weak, inadequate. I'm sorry? Is that all you have to say? I'm sorry. What else can I say, Sadie? There are no words for what I did. There's no excuse good enough. Then don't even try. At least tell me the truth. What happened? Why did you leave that way? And then Arthur told her everything. About losing his job, about the false accusations, about how he couldn't find another job, about starting to drink, about the fights with Martha, about the downward spiral he couldn't stop. About the night he left home and didn't come back, about how days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months, until coming back seemed impossible. Beatrice listened in silence, her face a mask that revealed nothing of what she was feeling. When he finished, she stayed quiet for a long time. Mom was pregnant when you left, she finally said. Arthur's eyes went wide. What? With James. She was 2 months pregnant. She was going to tell you that week, but you disappeared before she could. The color drained from Arthur's face. He opened and closed his mouth several times, but no sound came out. You have a son you never met. He grew up without a father. And you know what the most ironic part is? He became a musician. He works with musical instruments. It's like he's trying to know you through the only thing you two have in common. I have a son, Arthur whispered, tears starting to stream down his face. I have a son and I never knew. You would have known if you had come back, if you had called, if you had given any sign of life. Did Helena try to tell me? She tried to find you, but you had completely disappeared. Beatrice wiped away her own tears angrily. James is 30 years old now, 30 years that you lost, 30 years that he grew up without a father. Can I meet him? I don't know. He doesn't even know if he wants to meet you. To him, you're a stranger. Worse, you're the man who abandoned his mother while she was pregnant. But I didn't know. I never... It doesn't matter if you didn't know. The result is the same. Beatrice stood up. I came here because I needed answers. I needed to hear from your own mouth why you did what you did. Now that I've heard it, I still don't know if I can forgive you. But at least I know the truth. And your mother? How is she? You have no right to ask about her. I still love her, Sadie. I never stopped. Love doesn't abandon. Love fights. Love comes back. Sarah went to the door. If you really love someone, you don't disappear for 26 years. Sadie, wait. But she had already left, leaving Arthur alone in the meeting room, the full weight of what he had lost finally falling on him with enough force to take the air from his lungs. That afternoon, Martha showed up at the hotel where the competitors were staying. She hadn't told anyone she was coming. She simply got on one bus, then another, and went. At 62, Martha was still a beautiful woman, despite the grey strands in her once black hair and the expression lines etched by time and worry. At the hotel reception, she asked to see Arthur Miller. The receptionist hesitated, saying the competitors couldn't receive visitors without authorization from the production team. Martha was about to insist when she saw Arthur coming down the stairs, returning from a singing lesson the production had organized. He saw her at the same moment. He stopped mid-staircase, gripping the railing tightly. They stared at each other across the hotel lobby, two people who had once promised to spend their lives together, now separated by more than just a few feet of distance. Martha was the first to move. She walked toward him with measured, determined steps. Arthur came down the rest of the stairs slowly, as if heading to the gallows. When they finally stood face to face, neither of them knew what to say. Matty, Arthur finally spoke, using the nickname only he used. Don't call me that, she said, but her voice trembled. You lost that right. I know. 26 years, Arthur. For 26 years I thought you were dead, or that you had left us for another woman, or that you'd had an accident and lost your memory. I created so many scenarios in my head, but none of them were the truth, were they? No. The truth is, you simply gave up. On me, on our children, on our life. I didn't give up on you. I gave up on myself. Martha slapped him. It was so fast and unexpected that Arthur didn't even try to dodge. The mark of her hand stayed red on his face. The few people in the hotel lobby looked over, but no one intervened. "How could you?" Martha asked, her voice finally breaking. "How could you do this to us? I was pregnant, Arthur. Pregnant with our second child, and you left and never came back. Sadie told me. About James." Arthur was openly crying now. "Matty, I swear I didn't know. If I had known—" "What, you would have come back? Don't make me laugh. You knew about Sarah and you still left. One more child wouldn't have made a difference." "It would have. It would have made all the difference. Liar. You're a liar and a coward." But Martha was crying too now. "I worked until my fingers bled to raise our children. I sewed clothes in the wee hours, cleaned houses, worked in a bakery, all alone. Because you weren't there. Because you chose the streets over us. I didn't choose the streets. I lost myself. And when I tried to find myself again, it was already too late. It's never too late to come back home, Arthur. Never. But you had to want to. And you didn't." "I did. Every single day I did. But how could I come back like that? Drunk, stinking, broke? How could I look at you, at our children, and say I had failed at everything? Do you think I would have cared about that? Do you think I would have minded old clothes or a bad smell if you were alive and came back home?" Martha covered her face with her hands. "All I wanted was to have you back. That's all. I didn't care how, as long as you came back." Arthur took a step toward her, arms outstretched, but Martha stepped back. "No. You don't have permission to touch me. Not after everything." "Martha, please. I came here because I needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed to be sure it was real, that you were really alive. Now that I've seen it, I can finally move on." "Move on?" "Yes. All these years a part of me stayed trapped waiting for you. Waiting for you to come back, waiting for an explanation, waiting for something. But now I see that you were never coming back, and that sets me free." "Don't say that. Please don't say that." "It's the truth, Arthur. You made your choice 26 years ago. Now I'm making mine." Martha wiped away her tears and straightened her shoulders. "I hope you win the show. I hope you find success and happiness. But do it without us. We've suffered enough. And what about our children? What about James? I never even got to meet my own son." "That's not my fault. It's yours. If you want to meet him, you're going to have to earn that right. He's a grown man now, capable of making his own decisions. If he wants to meet you, that should be his decision." Martha turned to leave, but Arthur called out to her. "Martha, wait. Just one thing." When she stopped and looked back, he asked, Were you happy? In all that time, were you able to be happy?" Martha thought about the question for a long moment. "No, but I found peace. And that had to be enough." She left the hotel without looking back. Arthur stood there in the lobby, feeling as though he had just lost her for the second time. And this time he knew it was permanent. The days that followed were intense. Arthur devoted himself completely to rehearsals for the next phase of the show. The production offered classes, but he discovered he didn't need much. 26 years on the streets had refined his talent in ways no formal lesson ever could. Every note he played carried real pain, real experience, real life. The other contestants began to respect him more. Ryan, the young man who had initially treated him with disdain, now asked for advice on how to put more emotion into his performances. George and Stan included Arthur in their conversations, in their jokes. He was no longer the strange beggar. He was just Arthur, a musician trying to get his shot just like all of them. But not everything was harmonious. One of the contestants, a 40-year-old man named Rick, was clearly jealous of the attention Arthur was receiving. He started spreading rumors through the hotel hallways, saying Arthur was getting special treatment from the production because he had a dramatic story. "It's all a setup," Rick would say to anyone who would listen. They're going to let the beggar win no matter how badly he sings, just because it'll bring in ratings. Charles Harrison, the director of the show, was in fact very interested in Arthur's story. Very interested. He called Sarah into his office 2 days before the next live performance. "We need to talk about your father," he said without beating around the bush. "There's nothing to talk about," Sarah replied coldly. "Yes, there is. You know as well as I do that his story will bring in ratings. A father and daughter reuniting after decades on national television. That's pure gold. And you want to exploit it? I want to give people what they want to see, real drama, true emotion." "No," Sarah said firmly. "Absolutely not. You are not going to use my family as entertainment." "Sarah, be reasonable. This could be good for everyone. Your father gets visibility, maybe even wins the show. You get recognition for producing one of the most memorable moments in American television, and the show gets ratings. And what I get is my personal pain exposed to millions of people. No, thank you. You're being selfish. Think about the opportunity this represents for him." "Selfish?" Sarah stood up, furious. "He's the one who was selfish when he abandoned us. I'm being protective of my privacy, which is a right I have. Technically, when your father signed up for the show, he signed a waiver allowing us to explore any relevant aspect of his story. And I didn't sign a damn thing authorizing you to explore mine." Charles leaned back in his chair, calculating. "All right, how about a deal? We won't force you to appear on TV or tell your story. But if moments between you and your father naturally come up behind the scenes, and if the cameras capture them, we're not going to pretend they didn't happen. There won't be any moments between me and him. I avoid him as much as I can. That's also an interesting narrative, the daughter who can't forgive." Sarah realized she was trapped. No matter what she did, Charles would find a way to turn it into content. It was his job, and he was very good at it. "Do whatever you want," she said wearily, "but don't expect me to cooperate." That night, Arthur found out about the conversation through Ryan, who had overheard 2 producers commenting in the hallway. He was furious. He went looking for Charles in his office. "You're not going to use my daughter for ratings," Arthur said without preamble as he walked in. Charles smiled that snake-like smile. "Mr. Miller, it's not up to you to decide what I do or don't do with my show. It is up to me when it involves my family. She's already suffered enough because of me. I'm not going to let you add more suffering. Do you really want to protect your daughter? Then win the show. Show her you're not just a failed beggar. Show her you still have worth." The words hit Arthur like a punch to the gut. It was exactly what he wanted, to prove he was still worth something, that he wasn't just a waste of space, but winning at the expense of Sarah's privacy. Was that right? "I'm going to win," he said slowly, "but I'll win through my talent, not through manufactured drama." "Talent alone isn't enough on TV, my friend. You need a story, and your story is a good one. Use it." Arthur left the office feeling dirty. He had come to the show just to sing, to get his music on record. He hadn't imagined it would turn into all of this circus of emotions and manipulations. On the day of the next live performance, the nervousness among the contestants was palpable. 20 people had made it through the first round, but only 12 would remain after tonight. Arthur would be the 10th to perform. Backstage, while waiting for his turn, he saw James for the first time. There was no mistaking him. The young man was the perfect mix of Martha and himself. He had Arthur's brown eyes, but the shape of Martha's face, and he carried a guitar case on his back. Arthur got up from the chair he was sitting in, his legs feeling weak. James saw him at the same time and stopped walking. They stared at each other across the crowded backstage corridor. Father and son, complete strangers. It was James who took the first step. He walked over to Arthur with a cautious, guarded expression. "You're Arthur." It wasn't a question. "Yes, and you're James." "My name is actually James Arthur. My mother gave me your name even though you left." There was an accusation in his words, but also something else. Curiosity, perhaps. She was always too generous. More than I deserved. "Is it true you didn't know about me when you left?" Arthur nodded, unable to speak. Seeing this man, his son, so close was almost too much to bear. "Sadie told me. She said you didn't know Mom was pregnant." "If I had known." "Don't finish that sentence," James interrupted. Don't tell me that if you had known, you would have stayed, because you knew about Sarah, and you still left. So one more child wouldn't have made a difference. That's not true. It would have made all the difference. I don't believe you, not yet. James adjusted the guitar case on his back. But I watched your performance in the first round, and I have to admit you're good. Really good. Do you play too? Yeah. Acoustic guitar, electric guitar, a little piano. James hesitated. I work at a music store. I've always liked music, even without knowing where that came from. It came from me, and from your grandfather. He was a musician too. I know. Mum used to tell me stories about him. James looked at his watch. I have to go. I came here with Sarah. She's working today. Wait, Arthur called. You're going to watch my performance? James thought for a moment. Yeah, I'll watch. Not for you, but for the music. I respect talent, even when I don't respect the person. And with that, he left, leaving Arthur alone again, but this time with a small seed of hope. His son had come, had talked to him. It was a start. When it was his turn to take the stage, Arthur was more nervous than the first time. This time he knew James and Sarah were watching. Martha was probably watching too, at home, in front of the television. Everyone he loved and had disappointed was watching. He couldn't mess up. The song he chose to perform was called Come Back Home. He had written it years ago, on a particularly cold night, sleeping on a park bench, imagining what it would be like if he could go back in time and make different choices. The first notes filled the auditorium. Arthur closed his eyes and allowed himself to feel everything. The pain, the regret, the love that never died, the faint but persistent hope that maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance at redemption. The lyrics told of a lost man trying to find his way back, about doors he didn't have the courage to knock on, about lit windows he watched from afar, about a love that never went away, even when the person did. In the audience, Sarah felt tears rolling down her face and didn't try to wipe them away. Beside her, James was stiff, trying not to get emotional, but failing. Backstage, several contestants watching on monitors were crying too. And at home, sitting alone in the living room that was once hers and Arthur's, Martha held an old photo and finally let the sobs out, 26 years of suffering pouring out all at once. The performance ended with Arthur kneeling on stage, holding his guitar, completely emotionally drained. The silence that followed was more eloquent than any applause. Then, slowly, the audience stood up. It wasn't a noisy ovation. It was something deeper, more respectful. It was the acknowledgement that they had just witnessed something deeply personal and true. The three judges were visibly moved. Kimberly White didn't even try to wipe her tears. "Arthur," she began, her voice choked. "I have no words. That was the most honest thing I've ever seen on a stage." Mr. Anthony Sterling, the veteran songwriter, slowly shook his head. 70 years. I've been on this earth for 70 years. I've written hundreds of songs. And you just taught me something about music that I didn't know, thank you. Even Stephen Brooks, usually cynical, was clearly affected. "You don't need to win this show," he said. "You've already won something more important. You managed to touch people's souls. And that's priceless." All three said yes for Arthur to advance. He made it to the semi-finals, along with 11 other contestants. But for him, the real victory would be if he could somehow start rebuilding the bridges he had burned with his family. After the performance, while the other contestants celebrated or consoled one another, depending on who had made it through or not, Arthur stayed alone in the dressing room. He was exhausted, empty. He had put so much of himself into that song that nothing was left. That was when someone knocked on the door. He opened it expecting Roberto or some other member of the production crew, but it was James. "Can I come in?" the young man asked. "Of course, please." James walked in and closed the door behind him. He stood there, clearly uncomfortable but determined to say something. That song, Come Back Home, it was about us, wasn't it? Arthur nodded. About us. About everything I lost and could never get back. Why did you never come back? Really? No excuses, no beating around the bush. Why? Arthur sat down heavily in a chair. Because I was ashamed. Because I was afraid. Because every day that passed made it harder to come back. And eventually, it seemed impossible. How do you explain one day of absence, a week, a month, a year, 26 years? There's no explanation that makes sense. So I just gave up trying. But you never gave up music. Music was the only thing that kept me human. It was the only way I had to express myself, to keep some connection to who I was before I lost everything. James opened the guitar case he had brought and took out a beautiful, well-cared-for guitar. "I want to show you something," he said, starting to play. The melody that came out of the instrument was familiar, but Arthur couldn't identify where it was from. Then James began to sing, and Arthur realized with a shock it was one of the songs he used to sing to Sarah when she was little, a song about birds flying home at the end of the day. "How do you know that song?" Arthur asked, moved. "Sarah taught me. She said it was a song you used to sing to her. When I was a kid and asked about you, she would sing that song to me. It was her way of making me feel connected to a father I never knew." Arthur covered his face with his hands, his shoulders trembling with sobs he could no longer hold back. James hesitated, then sat down beside him, still holding the guitar. "I don't know if I can forgive you," James said calmly. "But I want to get to know you. I want to understand where I come from. I want to know about my grandfather, about how you learned music, about everything." "I'll tell you everything," Arthur managed to say between sobs. "Everything you want to know. And I want you to teach me. Technique, style, everything you know about music." Arthur looked at his son through his tears. "You want me to teach you?" "Yes. I work with music, but I've never had a real teacher. And you, despite everything, are clearly a master. It would be a waste not to learn from you. It was so practical, so logical, so much like something Martha would say." Arthur almost smiled. "It will be an honor to teach you. When do you want to start?" "Tomorrow, if you're free." "I'm free. I'm completely free." James stood up to leave, but at the door he turned back. "One thing. Don't call me your son yet, not until I'm ready to call you Dad, okay?" "Okay." "Thank you, James, for giving me this chance. I'm not doing it for you, I'm doing it for me. I need this for my own peace." And he left, leaving Arthur alone, but for the first time in 26 years, not feeling completely lost. There was a light at the end of the tunnel, small, faint, but undeniably present. In the days that followed, Arthur and James began meeting regularly. James would bring his guitar, and they would spend hours playing together. Arthur teaching techniques he had learned over years on the streets. James sharing music theory he had studied on his own. Interestingly, they didn't talk much about the past during those sessions. They talked about music, about chords, about rhythm and melody. It was easier that way, building a connection through something safe before venturing into complicated emotional territory. Sarah knew about the meetings. James would tell her about them, and she would pretend not to care. But David, her husband, noticed that she grew quieter on those days, more thoughtful. One night, he gently confronted her. "Are you jealous about James spending time with your father?" "No, of course not," she answered too quickly. "Honey, it's normal to feel that way. You're the oldest daughter. You actually remember him, not just through stories. You suffered more consciously when he left, and now he's building a relationship with James while you're left out. He's not building anything. James is just learning music from him. It's something practical, not emotional." "Do you really believe that?" Sarah sighed. "No, I don't believe it, but it's easier to pretend I do than to admit I'm jealous of my own brother." "Why don't you try too, spending time with him?" "Because I don't want to get hurt again. It's different with James. He never had a father, so he doesn't have much to lose. But I remember what it was like to have him. I remember Sundays playing guitar in the living room, the lullabies, the laughter, and losing that once was already too painful. I can't risk going through that again." "But you're not risking losing anything. He's already lost. The question is whether you want to try finding him again." Sarah didn't answer, but the conversation stayed with her, echoing in her mind over the following days. Meanwhile, the show's production was doing exactly what Charles had promised, exploring every angle of Arthur's story. They found and interviewed people who had known him on the streets, a bakery owner who sometimes gave him stale bread, a woman who ran a shelter where he occasionally stayed, a street musician who had played with him on a few occasions. They all told slightly different versions of the same story. Arthur was a talented man, kind, but clearly carrying an immense weight. He never talked about his past, but the pain was always there, visible in every note he played. Charles also found out about the incident that had cost Arthur his job so many years ago. The school where he had worked still existed, now under new management. But old records showed the theft accusation against him. Charles was considering whether to dig deeper, maybe even try to clear Arthur's name as part of the show's narrative. When Sarah found out about it, she was furious. "You have no right to go messing with his life like that," she yelled at Charles in his office. "I do. He's part of the show now, and if I can help clear his name, why wouldn't I?" "Because it's not about helping him. It's about creating a dramatic moment for television." "Why can't it be both?" Charles argued. "Sarah, look, I know you're mad at him. You have every right to be. But if there's a chance of proving he was unfairly accused, that he lost everything because of a lie, wouldn't that be good for him? He lost everything because he chose drinking over his family. The accusation was just the trigger." "But what if it wasn't a choice? What if it was a spiral he couldn't stop? People aren't simple, Sarah. It's not always black and white." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, feel free to leave a like, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out since we're just starting out. Now continuing. Sarah hated to admit it, but Charles had a point. She had painted her father as a villain in her head for so long that she hadn't considered the possibility that things were more complicated than they seemed. But even if they were, would that change anything? He still left. He still stayed away for 26 years. Charles's investigation led to a name. Mr. Fletcher, who had been the vice principal at the school at the time and took over as principal right after Arthur left. Now retired, Mr. Fletcher lived in a comfortable house in a middle-class neighborhood. When confronted by the show's reporting team, Mr. Fletcher initially denied knowing anything, but when he was pressed, when they showed him the records, when they made it clear the story would air one way or another, he finally gave in. Yes, he was the one who had set Arthur up. Not because he hated the man, but because he wanted his position. It was that simple. Pure ambition, without remorse. The confession was recorded, and Charles planned to use it on the show during the semi-finals. When Sarah saw the recording, something inside her broke. For all those years, she had blamed her father for giving up too easily, for not fighting for the family. But now she saw that he had been the victim of a real injustice. That didn't erase the 26 years of abandonment, but it added a layer of complexity she hadn't considered. That night, she went to the hotel where Arthur was staying. She didn't tell him she was coming. She simply showed up at the front desk and asked them to call him. When he came down and saw her, he seemed genuinely surprised. "Sadie, what are you doing here?" "We need to talk, for real this time." They went to a nearby park, walking in silence along the lit paths. It was a warm night, the sound of cicadas filling the air. Sarah finally stopped at a bench and sat down. Arthur sat beside her, keeping a respectful distance. "I saw the recording," she began, "of the man who falsely accused you." Arthur didn't answer, he just nodded. "All these years I thought you had simply given up, that you hadn't fought hard enough, but now I see that someone was actively working against you. That doesn't change anything, Sadie. I still made the choices I made, I still left. I know, but it helps to understand why." She took a deep breath. "I spent so much time hating you, so much time blaming you for everything bad that happened in my life. If I didn't get into the university I wanted, it was your fault for not being there to help. If I didn't have a new dress for graduation, it was your fault for not having the money. If Mom cried, it was your fault. And you were right, it was my fault. It was and it wasn't. You made bad choices, yes, but the world was unfair to you too, and I never stopped to consider that." They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the noise of the city around them. "I want to try," Sarah said finally. I don't promise it'll work. I don't promise I'll be able to forgive you completely. But I want to try to get to know you again. Not the father I remember, because that man no longer exists, but the man you are now." Arthur felt hot tears running down his face. "I don't deserve this. I don't deserve your kindness." "Probably not. But I deserve peace. And to have peace, I need to understand. I need to hear your full story, not just the pieces I built up in my head. I'll tell you everything. Absolutely everything." And he told her. He began with his own childhood, the son of a poor musician who played in bars to support the family. He told her about learning guitar when he was 6, about the dream of becoming a great musician, about discovering he had a talent for teaching. He told her about meeting Martha at a community dance, about falling in love instantly, about the simple but happy marriage. He told her about Sarah being born, about holding that tiny baby and vowing to be the best father in the world, about teaching her to play her first notes on the guitar when she was 5, about the nights singing lullabies until she fell asleep. Then he told her about the hard part, about losing the job, about the accusation that ruined his reputation, about not being able to find another job, about the first drink, then the second, then losing count, about the fights with Martha, about seeing disappointment in Sarah's eyes, about the shame of not being able to provide for his family. And he told her about the night he left, about drinking until he blacked out, about waking up without knowing where he was, about the decision not to come back until he could get himself together, about days turning into weeks, weeks turning into months, the shame growing until it became an insurmountable barrier. He told her about the early years on the streets, about sleeping on park benches, about feeling cold, hunger, fear, about wanting to come back but not knowing how, about passing by their house and looking through the windows, watching Kimberly grow up, watching James being born without knowing he was his son. "I saw you graduate high school," Arthur said, his voice breaking. "I was across the street when you walked out of school with your diploma. You looked so beautiful, so proud. And I was hiding behind a lamppost, dirty, drunk, too ashamed to come near you." Kimberly sobbed. "I looked for you that day. In the crowd of parents, I looked for your face. Part of me still hoped you'd magically show up. I was there. I was always there, one way or another. I just never had the courage to actually be present." "And the drinking? Do you still drink?" "No. I stopped 12 years ago. One day I woke up after a night of drinking and realized I was about to cross a line from which there would be no return, so I stopped. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but I stopped." "Why? What changed?" "I saw a father with his little daughter. They were at a park, and he was teaching her how to ride a bike. And I realized that would never be me. It would never be me teaching my children anything again. And the drinking wasn't going to change that. It was just going to kill me faster. So I stopped." Kimberly wiped her tears and looked at her real father for the first time since he had come back. She saw the deep wrinkles, the grey streaks in his beard, the tired eyes. But she also saw something else. She saw genuine remorse. She saw pain. She saw a man who had lost everything and was trying, perhaps too late, to find some redemption. "I'm not going to call you Dad yet," she said. "But can I call you Arthur?" "You can call me whatever you want. The simple fact that you're still talking to me is more than I deserve." "And James, are you building something with him?" "I'm trying. He lets me teach him about music. It's a start. He's a good man. Despite everything, despite growing up without a father, he turned out to be a good man. Mom did an incredible job with us. She was always strong, always better than me. She still loves you, you know. Or at least, she loves the memory of who you were. I know. And that only makes it worse." They kept talking for hours until the park was about to close. For the first time in 26 years, father and daughter really talked. They didn't yell, they didn't accuse each other, they just spoke. And when they finally said goodbye, Kimberly did something she herself hadn't expected. She hugged her father. It was a quick hug, almost reluctant, but it was genuine. Arthur stood still, almost afraid to move, as if any motion might break the moment. When she pulled away, her eyes were red, but there was something in them that hadn't been there before. Hope, perhaps, or at least a path toward it. "Don't mess this up," she said before leaving. "This is your only chance, understand? If you mess it up, there won't be another." "I won't mess it up, I swear I won't." In the days that followed, the dynamic shifted. Arthur began spending time with both of his children, not just James. Sometimes the three of them would meet at a cafe near the hotel just to talk. It wasn't easy. There were moments of awkward silence, moments when old wounds were accidentally reopened, but there were also moments of laughter, of discovery, of connections being slowly rebuilt. Martha didn't take part in those meetings. Kimberly had tried to convince her, but she still wasn't ready. Seeing Arthur once had been enough. She needed time to process, to decide whether there was room in her life for the man who had once been her husband. The semi-final of the show arrived too quickly. 12 contestants, including Arthur, would perform for the audience. Only 6 would continue to the final. The pressure was enormous. Charles decided to use the recording of Mr. Fletcher's confession as part of the segment about Arthur. Before his performance, they would air a video telling his complete story: the wrongly accused teacher, the fall onto the streets, the reunion with his family through the show. Sarah tried to stop it, but Arthur surprised her by saying it was fine. "Let them show it," he said. "I spent 26 years hiding from the truth. I'm not going to hide anymore. But you'll be exposed to millions of people. Your pain, our pain, everything. And maybe someone watching needs to hear that it's possible to start over, that it's never too late to try to make things right." The night of the semi-final was charged with emotion. When it was Arthur's turn, the video about his life was shown. The audience watched in silence the story of a man who lost everything because of a lie, sank into addictions, lived on the streets, and was now trying to reconnect with the family he had abandoned. Mr. Fletcher's confession was especially impactful. Seeing the man who had destroyed Arthur's life admitting his guilt provoked outrage in the audience. Some people booed, others cried. When Arthur finally stepped onto the stage, he was no longer just a contestant. He was a symbol of redemption, of second chances, of never giving up even when everything seems lost. The song he chose for the semi-final was different from the previous ones. It was lighter, more hopeful. It was called Dawn After the Storm, and it was about starting over, about finding light after darkness. He sang looking directly at where Sarah and James were sitting in the audience. He sang for them, for Martha, who was watching from home, for himself. He sang like he had never sung before, putting everything, the pain, the regret, but also the hope, into every note. The performance was flawless. When he finished, the ovation was deafening. The 3 judges stood up, the entire audience stood up. It was a moment of collective catharsis, everyone in the auditorium feeling something deep and true. Kimberly White could barely speak through her tears. "Arthur, you just reminded me why I got into this industry, why music matters. Because it can heal, it can transform, it can make us believe in miracles again." Mr. Anthony Sterling, who had seen countless artists throughout his long career, was visibly moved. "I will die in peace, knowing I witnessed this. Thank you, my friend. Thank you for reminding us of the pure power of true music." Stephen Brooks, usually reserved with praise, got straight to the point. "You've already won, Arthur. No matter what happens for the rest of this show, you've already won the most important thing, your family back. The rest is just music." Arthur advanced to the final along with 5 other contestants. But as Stephen had said, that no longer mattered as much. What mattered was that, after the show, when he came down from the stage, Sarah and James were waiting for him. And for the first time in more than 2 decades, they embraced him. The 3 together, a family trying to rebuild itself. The show's production offered Arthur the opportunity to legally clear his name. They had lawyers, resources. With Mr. Fletcher's confession, it would be easy to overturn the old accusation. Arthur accepted, not out of pride, but because he wanted his children to not have to live with the stain of a father accused of theft. The process was quick. Mr. Fletcher, ashamed by the public exposure, did not contest it. The school where the incident happened issued an official apology. It didn't change the past, didn't give back the lost years, but it was something. It was proof that he had been wronged, that his downfall wasn't entirely his fault. Meanwhile, his relationship with Martha remained complicated. She watched every episode of the show, watched Arthur transforming, watching him reconnect with his children. And she felt conflicting emotions: happiness for him doing better, anger at him taking so long, fear of letting herself hope again. One night, she called Sarah. "Is he doing well?" she asked. "He is, Mom. He's really trying, and I think he's being sincere. And did you forgive him?" "Not completely yet, but I'm on my way." Sarah hesitated. "And you, do you think about talking to him again?" "I think about it every day. But I don't know if I can. I don't know if I'm strong enough to risk my heart again." "You're the strongest woman I know, Mom. If anyone is strong enough, it's you." "Strong doesn't mean immune to pain, sweetheart." "I know. But sometimes courage isn't about not feeling fear. It's about feeling fear and doing it anyway." Martha thought about this after hanging up. She stayed up all night looking at old photos, remembering what they had been. The young couple full of dreams, the father teaching his little daughter to play guitar, the family that could have been. The next morning she made a decision. She took the bus to the hotel where Arthur was staying, but this time she let him know. She sent a message through Sarah saying she wanted to talk. Arthur almost fainted when he got the news. They met in the same park where Sarah and Arthur had talked weeks before. Martha arrived first, sitting on a bench in the shade of a tree. When Arthur appeared, she almost didn't recognize him. He had trimmed his beard, was wearing clean, well-fitted clothes, and had even gained a little weight. He still looked older than he should, but there was a dignity to him that hadn't been there before. "Lena," he said as he approached. "Arthur," she replied, gesturing for him to sit. They stayed silent for a while, neither knowing how to begin. It was Martha who finally spoke. "You look different." "A hot shower and regular meals work miracles," he tried to joke, but the joke fell flat. "It's not just that. You seem lighter, as if a weight had been lifted." It had. Seeing our children, being able to talk to them, that lifted a weight I carried for 26 years. "James is a good kid." "I know. You did an incredible job raising them on your own." "I didn't have a choice." "I know that too, and I'm sorry. There aren't enough words to say how sorry I am." Martha looked at her hands in her lap. "I came here because I need to know something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Anything." "If you had known about James, if I had managed to tell you before you left, would you have stayed?" Arthur took his time answering, really thinking about the question. "I want to say yes. I want to say that knowing about another child would have given me the strength to fight, not to give up. But the truth is, I don't know. I was in such a dark place back then that I don't know if anything would have made a difference." Martha nodded, appreciating the brutal honesty. "At least you didn't lie." "I lied too much in my life, Lena. To you, to myself. I'm not going to do that anymore." "Do you still love me?" she asked suddenly, looking directly into his eyes. "Yes. I never stopped. Even on the worst nights, on the streets, drunk and lost, it was you I saw when I closed my eyes. It was your voice I heard calling me back. But it wasn't enough to make you actually come back. No. And that's my greatest flaw. I loved you, but I didn't love myself enough to think I deserved to come back. And now? Do you love yourself now?" Arthur thought about it. "I'm learning. For the first time in decades, I'm looking in the mirror and seeing someone who might be worth something. I'm not there yet, but I'm trying." Martha remained silent, processing. Then she said something that surprised them both. "I still love you too. I hate admitting that. I spent years trying to hate you, trying to erase you from my heart, but I couldn't. You're still there, a part of me that never left. Marty, but that doesn't change anything. Love isn't enough. Love was never enough. We need trust. And I don't trust you. Not yet. I understand. And I don't expect you to trust me. I just hope that someday, maybe, you might consider giving me a chance to prove I've changed. Changed or changing, because real change doesn't happen in weeks, Arthur. It takes time. It takes consistency. You're right. I am changing. And I'll keep changing. Every day I make the choice to be better. I can't promise I'll always succeed, but I can promise I'll try." Martha stood up to leave, but before she did, she gently placed her hand on his face. It was the first time she had touched him since he came back. Arthur closed his eyes at the touch, memories flooding back. "Win the show," she said. "Show the world the talent I always knew you had. And then, when the cameras go off and the attention fades, if you're still here, still trying to be better, then maybe we'll talk again." And she left, leaving Arthur on the park bench, feeling for the first time in years something that wasn't just empty hope, but real possibility. The show's finale was scheduled for 2 weeks from then. 6 contestants, including Arthur, would perform. A winner would be chosen by the popular vote, combined with the judge's decision. The prize included a recording contract, a sponsored tour, and a significant amount of money. But for Arthur, none of that mattered as much as the chance to sing his songs to the world, to show that it was possible to get back up, no matter how far you had fallen. In the days before the finale, something unexpected happened. Arthur received a call from the director of the community school where James worked. They had heard about him through the show and wanted to know if he would be interested in teaching music classes. It wouldn't be anything big, just a few hours a week, but it would be a start. Arthur could hardly believe it. After so many years, someone was willing to give him the chance to teach again. "Are you going to accept?" James asked when Arthur told him. "Do you think I should?" "Dad," it was the first time James had used that word. "I think you should do what makes you happy, and I see it in you when you're teaching. You shine." Arthur felt tears in his eyes, hearing James call him Dad. "You called me Dad." James smiled a little awkwardly. "Yeah, well, I guess you earned it. You're trying, and I can see it's genuine. So, yeah, Dad." Arthur accepted the position at the school, with a start date set for after the show ended. It was as if the pieces of his life were finally starting to fall into place, but not everything was perfect. Rick, the jealous contestant, started spreading rumors that Arthur had an unfair advantage because he had a dramatic story, that the judges had already decided he would win no matter what. Some of the other contestants started believing it, creating tension behind the scenes. Ryan, who had become friends with Arthur, defended him. "You guys are idiots if you think a story is enough to win. The man has real talent. The pain in his voice is real. You can't compete with that because none of you lived what he lived through." "Exactly my point," Rick shot back. "How do we compete with someone who has the whole audience crying before he even starts singing?" "By singing better," Ryan said simply. "If you're good enough, you'll win. If you don't, you'll lose. Simple as that." The argument almost turned into a fight, but Arthur intervened. "Stop," he said calmly. "Rick, you're right. I have a story that draws attention, but in the end, people vote for whoever sings best, whoever moves them the most. And if you think you can't compete with me, maybe the problem isn't me." There was a moment of tension. Then Rick backed down, grumbling but out of arguments. George, one of the oldest competitors, pulled Arthur aside afterward. "You know he's scared, right? We all are. You have something we don't. Complete authenticity. When you sing, it's not a performance. It's a confession. You all have stories too, everyone does. But our stories aren't as visceral. Most of us are here because we love music and want a career. You're here because music is the only thing that kept you alive. There's a difference." Arthur didn't know how to respond to that, so he just nodded. The night before the final, Arthur couldn't sleep. He sat by the window of his hotel room, looking out at the glowing city, acoustic guitar on his lap. He played softly, just for himself, all the songs he had composed over the years, songs no one had ever heard, songs that held his deepest secrets. Ryan woke up and heard him playing. "Can't sleep?" "No. A lot on my mind." "Nervous about the final?" "A little. But it's not just that." Arthur stopped playing. "I keep thinking about how fast life can change. 2 months ago I was sleeping in shelters, playing on the streets for spare change. And now I'm here, about to compete in the final of a national show with my kids talking to me again. with a chance to teach music again. It feels like a dream. You deserve this, man. After everything you've been through, you deserve something good. I don't know about deserving, but I'm grateful. Deeply grateful. What are you going to sing tomorrow? A new song. I wrote it this week. It's called New Beginning. About what? About never being too late. About second chances. About forgiveness, both receiving it and giving it to yourself. Arthur looked at Ryan. And you? What are you going to sing? I'm still deciding. But whatever it is, I'll give it my all. And if you win, I'll be the first to congratulate you. And if you win, Ryan smiled, then you owe me a beer, or in your case, a juice. They laughed, the tension of the moment easing a little. The morning of the final was rainy. The studio would be packed, cameras ready, the country watching. Each competitor was allowed one song and up to 5 special guests in the audience. Arthur invited Martha, Sarah, James, David, Sarah's husband, and a 5th person who surprised everyone. Mrs. Gable, the woman who ran one of the shelters where he had stayed over the years. She had been kind to him when no one else was, and he wanted her to see that her kindness hadn't been wasted. When the 5 arrived and were escorted to their VIP seats in the front row, Arthur felt an overwhelming emotion. There was his family, or at least the beginning of one. It wasn't perfect. There were still wounds to heal. But it was real. It was his. Martha avoided looking directly at him when she sat down, but James waved and Sarah gave a small encouraging smile. David gave a thumbs up, and Mrs. Gable, in her 70s, simply smiled with tears in her eyes. The show began. Each competitor would give their best. Rick sang a powerful ballad about dreams and determination. Ryan chose an upbeat song about celebrating life. George went with a classic American standard. The others also impressed, each in their own way. Arthur would be the last to perform. As he waited, he watched every competitor's performance, feeling pride and respect for all of them. They were people with their own dreams, their own struggles. They weren't enemies. They were fellow travelers on the journey. Finally, it was his turn. When the host announced his name, the audience erupted in applause before he even set foot on the stage. He walked calmly, holding the guitar that had accompanied him for so many years on the streets. An old, battle-worn instrument that had seen the worst and the best of humanity. At center stage, Arthur adjusted the microphone and looked out at the audience. Thousands of people, but his eyes went straight to the front row. To Martha, who finally looked back, her eyes shining. To Sadie and James, his children he almost lost forever. To David, who had been patient and understanding with Sadie through all of this, and to Mrs. Gable, who represented all the people who had shown kindness to a stranger on the streets. "Good evening," he said, his voice surprisingly steady. "Before I sing, I want to say a few words. For years I lived in the shadows, hidden from the light, hidden from the people I loved, because I thought I didn't deserve to be near them. But this show, this experience, taught me something. It taught me that it's never too late to try again. It's never too late to ask for forgiveness. It's never too late to come back home." He looked directly at Martha. "This song is for all the people who have lost themselves and thought there was no way back, for all the broken families who need to hear that they can be mended, and especially for the woman I still love, the woman I never should have left, but who, thank God, is still here, giving me a chance to prove that I've changed." Martha covered her mouth with her hand, tears beginning to fall freely. Arthur began to play. A New Beginning was a different song from the ones he had performed before. It wasn't just about pain and regret. It was about hope, about getting back up after falling, about finding light after darkness. The lyrics spoke of a man who had lost his way, but found it again through music, through a love that never fully died, through the strength to admit his flaws and try to make things right. It spoke of forgiveness, both receiving it and giving it to oneself. As he sang, Arthur wasn't thinking about the competition, the judges, or the millions watching. He was thinking only about the music, the truth it carried, and the present moment, which was all that truly mattered. In the front row, Martha couldn't stop crying. Beside her, Sadie held her hand on one side, and James's hand on the other. The three of them together, a family beginning to heal. The song reached its climax, Arthur's voice rising on a final sustained note that seemed to carry all the weight of the last 26 years and all the hope of the future. When the last note finally died out, the silence that followed was absolute. Then the audience exploded. It wasn't just applause, it was emotional hysteria, people crying, screaming, standing, clapping until their hands hurt. At the judges' table, all three of them were standing too, applauding with tears on their faces. But Arthur barely noticed. His eyes were fixed on Martha, who rose from her chair and began walking toward the stage. Security tried to stop her, but Charles, from the control room, gave the order to let her through. He knew television gold when he saw it. Martha climbed onto the stage, still crying, and walked straight up to Arthur. He set his guitar aside, uncertain of what she would do. She stood in front of him for a moment that seemed to last an eternity. Then, before millions of people watching, she embraced him. It was a deep, desperate hug, filled with pain and love and years of separation. Arthur held her, as if she would disappear if he let go, sobbing openly into her shoulder. She whispered something in his ear, something the cameras didn't catch, something just for the two of them. "Welcome home, Arthur." The audience went even more wild. Even the other contestants backstage were crying. It was impossible not to be moved. It was impossible not to be touched by the pure humanity of that moment. Sarah and James also went up on stage, not caring about protocols. The four of them stood there, a family reunited after decades apart, embracing in the middle of the stage while the entire auditorium witnessed it. The judges didn't even try to give their usual comments. What could they possibly say that would add anything to that? Kimberly simply nodded yes through her tears. Mr. Anthony Sterling made the sign of the cross, too emotional to speak. Stephen just nodded, respectful and silent. After everyone came down from the stage, after the commercials, came the moment of the vote. The audience would vote through text messages, and the judges would also give their scores. Combined, they would determine the winner. While waiting for the results, the contestants stayed together backstage. Ryan pulled Arthur aside. "Dude, no matter who wins, you already won. What happened up there? That was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." "Thank you, Ryan, for everything, for being kind when I needed it most. Kindness is free, man, and you deserved it." Rick, surprisingly, also approached. "I was an idiot to you. I'm sorry. I was jealous, envious. But you're the real deal. I hope you win." Arthur shook his hand. "You're talented too. Never doubt that." George and Stan also came to give their congratulations. All the contestants, in one way or another, recognized that they had witnessed something special. In the VIP dressing rooms, Martha was with her kids, still processing everything. Mrs. Gable sat down beside her. "You still love him, don't you?" the older woman asked gently. "Yes," Martha admitted. "I tried not to love him, I tried to hate him. But the heart doesn't obey logic." "So what are you going to do?" "I don't know. Everything is still so complicated." Sarah knelt in front of her mother, holding her hands. "Mom, I spent weeks struggling with anger and hurt. And you know what I learned? That holding on to those things only hurts me. It doesn't hurt him. It hurts me." She wiped her mother's tears. "If you still love him, give him a chance. I'm not saying forget the past. I'm saying consider the future." "What if he disappoints me again?" "What if he doesn't?" James added. "Mum, I grew up without a father. And I'm not going to lie. It hurt. But now that I have the chance to know him, to have him in my life, I don't want to waste that, and neither should you." Martha looked at her children, so grown, so wise. When had they become the adults and she the scared child? "Do you really think he's changed?" "We think he's changing," Sarah corrected. "And that has to be enough. Nobody changes overnight. But he's trying. Every day, he's trying." Martha nodded slowly. Maybe they were right. Maybe she should at least try. Back on the main stage, the host finally had the results. The 6 finalists were called to the stage. Arthur was the last to go up, still shaking from the emotion of everything that had happened. "Ladies and gentlemen, the host said with that dramatic TV voice. "The moment everyone has been waiting for has arrived. The United States has voted. The judges have deliberated. And now we have our winner of the 10th season of American Stars." The dramatic pause seemed to last an eternity. With 73% of the public vote and a unanimous decision from the judges, the winner is Arthur Miller. The auditorium exploded in celebration. Confetti fell from the ceiling. Music played. The other contestants hugged Arthur, some crying, all genuinely happy for him. Ryan lifted him off the ground in a bear hug. Arthur was in shock. He couldn't process it. Had he won? Had he really won? The host placed a ridiculous crown on his head and handed him a huge bouquet of flowers. But Arthur barely noticed. His eyes searched for and found Martha in the audience. She was smiling through tears, clapping along with everyone else. "Arthur," the host shouted over the noise, "you've just won $200,000, a recording contract with the country's biggest label, and a national tour. How do you feel?" How did he feel? Arthur had no words, so he did the only thing that made sense. He asked for the microphone and began to sing. Not the song he had prepared, but the lullaby he used to sing to Sarah when she was little, the same one James had played for him weeks earlier. The audience went quiet, listening to that beautiful voice sing a simple melody about unconditional love, about parents and children, about never giving up on the ones we love. When he finished, even the host was crying. It was, without a doubt, the most emotional ending the show had ever had. After the cameras went dark, after the audience filed out, after all the congratulations and interviews, Arthur finally found himself alone with his family backstage. There was a moment of awkward silence, no one quite knowing what to say now that the frenzy had passed. It was Mrs. Gable who broke the silence. "Well, I'll leave you all to talk as a family." She hugged Arthur tightly. "I'm proud of you, son. So proud." After she left, the 5 of them stood there. Arthur, Martha, Sarah, James, and David. "Now what?" Sarah asked, always practical. "Now," Arthur said slowly, "I honor my promises. I'm going to start teaching at the community school as planned. I'm going to record my music. But more importantly, I'm going to be present. For all of you. If you'll let me." "Where are you going to live?" James asked. "The hotel was temporary, right?" "I was thinking about renting a room somewhere. With the prize money, I can pay a few months in advance." Martha made a decision in that moment, a decision that surprised even herself. "No, you're going to live with me." Everyone looked at her shocked. "Mom," Sarah began. "I didn't say we're getting back together as husband and wife," Martha quickly clarified. "I said he's going to live with me. I have a guest room that's been empty for years. He can stay there. It'll give us time to get to know each other again, without pressure, without expectations." "Lena, are you sure?" Arthur asked, barely believing it. "No, I'm not sure about anything, but I'm willing to try, with conditions." "What conditions?" "First, you're going to stay sober. 1 drink and you're out of the house. Second, you're going to have responsibilities. You'll help with the bills, with the house. Third, you're going to give me space when I need it. And fourth, if I say it's not working, you accept it and leave without drama. Agreed?" "I agree to everything. Absolutely everything." Sarah and James exchanged looks, still processing. David, always the mediator, spoke up. "Sounds like a reasonable plan. You two need time together to see if you can rebuild something." "And you two?" Martha asked the kids. "What do you think?" "I think," Sarah said carefully, "that it's your decision, Mom. But I'm here for you no matter what happens." "Me too," James added. "And Dad," he looked at Arthur. "Don't mess this up. Seriously. This is your last chance." "I know, son. I know." In the weeks that followed, Arthur moved into the guest room at Martha's house. It was strange at first. Sharing space with someone you've loved, lost, and are trying to love again in completely new ways is complicated. They settled into routines. Arthur woke up early, made coffee for the 2 of them. Martha appreciated that more than she wanted to admit. They had coffee together, talking about small things at first, the weather, the news. Slowly the conversations grew deeper. Arthur started his classes at the community school. He discovered he loved teaching as much as he remembered. His students, many of them from poor families, responded to his enthusiasm, his patience, the fact that he truly understood struggle and hardship. The record label he had signed with was eager to get started. But Arthur asked for time. He wanted to compose new songs, songs that reflected not just his past pain, but his present hope. One night, a few weeks after moving in, Arthur was in the living room playing guitar when Martha came downstairs to get water. She stopped at the doorway watching him play, memories flooding back. Memories of when they were young, when everything seemed possible, when love felt like it was enough to conquer anything. "Is that a new one?" she asked, startling him. "Yeah, I just wrote it. It's called Rebuilding. Can I hear it?" "Of course." He played it for her, a sweet, melancholic melody about two people trying to rebuild something that was broken, not knowing if it would work out, but trying anyway. When he finished, Martha was crying silently. "It's beautiful. Is it about us? It's about the possibility of us, about hope, even when we're not sure." Martha sat down beside him on the couch, closer than they had been since he came back. "Arthur, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Always. Are you here because you love me, or because you feel guilty?" Arthur set the guitar aside, looking directly into her eyes. "At first it was guilt, a lot of guilt, but now it's love. It's waking up and remembering why I fell in love with you 40 years ago. It's seeing the strength you have, the grace, the ability to forgive even when it hurts so much. It's knowing I don't deserve you, but wanting to fight every day to become someone who does. And what if I say I'll never be able to fully trust you again? Then I'll spend the rest of my life trying to earn your trust, even knowing I might never fully get it, because you're worth it. Our family is worth it." Martha took a deep breath, making a decision. "I want to try. I really do. Not just you living here. I want to try to rebuild what we had. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be scary. But I want to try. Are you sure?" "No, but I'm going to do it anyway." Arthur pulled her into a hug, and for the first time in 26 years, she let herself fully relax in his arms. It didn't resolve the past. It didn't erase the pain. But it was a start. In the months that followed, Arthur released his first album. Songs of the Streets was a collection of songs he had composed during his lost years, plus a few new ones about starting over. It was a moderate success, not exactly at the top of the charts, but it sold well enough and received excellent reviews. The tour that was part of the prize took him to small towns and big cities all across the country. And at every show, he told his story. Not to gain sympathy, but to give hope. To show that no matter how low you fall, there's always a chance to rise again. Martha joined him for some of the shows. Watching him on stage, seeing the way people responded to his music, she remembered the young dreamer she had fallen in love with. He was back. Not exactly the same, but a wiser, more broken, more real version. Sarah and James also attended several shows. James sometimes went up on stage to play with his father, creating magical moments of musical connection between father and son. Sarah still kept some emotional distance, but she was there, supporting, slowly letting the walls around her heart crumble. A year after the show, Arthur and Martha were sitting in the backyard, having coffee in the late afternoon. Things between them had progressed slowly but steadily. They weren't the young, passionate couple they had once been, but they were something new. Something built on brutal honesty and hard-won forgiveness. "Are you happy?" Martha asked suddenly. Arthur thought about the question. "Yes. For the first time in decades, I'm genuinely happy. Not perfect. I still wake up some mornings afraid everything will disappear. I still struggle with regrets. But yes, I'm happy." "Me too," Martha admitted. "It's strange. I spent so much time being strong, being the one who holds everything together alone, that I forgot what it's like to let someone help carry the weight." "Thank you for letting me help, for letting me come back. Thank you for coming back finally." A few months later, something unexpected happened. The school where Arthur had worked decades ago reached out. They wanted to hold a public ceremony apologizing, officially clearing his name, and offering him a position as director of the music department. The salary would be good, the hours reasonable, and he would have creative freedom to develop the program however he wanted. Arthur considered it carefully. It was tempting. It was validation. It was everything he had wanted when he was falsely accused so many years ago. But then he thought about his students at the community school, poor children who would never have music lessons if it weren't for programs like that one. He thought about how their eyes lit up when they learned a new song, when they mastered a difficult chord. He turned down the private school's offer. Instead, he used some influence and money from his prize to expand the program at the community school, hiring more teachers, buying more instruments. When he told Martha about his decision, she kissed him. It was the first real kiss since he had come back, and it meant more than any contract or position could. "Why did you do it?" she asked. "Because I spent years being selfish, thinking only about myself and my pain. Now I want to use what I have to help others. I want to teach children who think they don't have a chance. I want to show them that music can save lives. It literally saved mine." 2 years after the program, on a sunny Sunday afternoon, Arthur and Martha remarried. It wasn't a big ceremony, just close family and a few friends. Sarah was maid of honor, still with skeptical eyes but a genuine smile. James walked his mother down the aisle and placed her hand in Arthur's. "Take care of her," James whispered, "or I'll find you." "I will. I promise." The ceremony was simple but beautiful. They exchanged vows they had written themselves. Martha promised to give him the chance he had asked for, to keep rebuilding with patience and love. Arthur promised to be present, to be honest, to be the man she deserved, one day at a time. There was no fairy tale, and they lived happily ever after. Life is more complicated than that. There were hard days, there were fights, there were moments when old wounds opened again, but there was also laughter. There was music played in the living room. There were family dinners with Sarah, James, David, and eventually grandchildren. There were small trips, discovering the country Arthur had only traveled through on streets before. There were moments of pure joy, like when the community school where Arthur taught won a national award for excellence in music education, or when James opened his own instrument shop and asked his father to be his partner. There were also moments of bittersweet pain, like when they visited Arthur's father's grave, and he finally made peace with the past he had carried for so long. Sarah eventually had her own child, a boy she named Arthur in honor of his grandfather. Watching Arthur hold his grandson for the first time with tears of joy in his eyes was a moment of deep healing for everyone. "I promise you," Arthur whispered to the baby, "that I'll be here. For every birthday, every graduation, every important moment, your grandfather isn't going to disappear." And he kept that promise. He was there, every day, in all the small ways that mattered. 5 years after the show, Arthur released his third album, Family. It was a collection of songs about the last few years, about rebuilding, about forgiveness, about love that survives even the worst storms. The final track, a duet with Martha that he had convinced her to record, was called After the Storm, and was about finding peace and beauty after years of chaos. The album wasn't a huge commercial success, but it was deeply personal and moved the people who heard it. Arthur received hundreds of letters from people sharing their own stories of redemption, of second chances, of families that came back together. One letter in particular moved him deeply. It was from a man who had been homeless for 8 years and was about to give up completely when he saw Arthur's show on a store TV. The story inspired him to seek help, to try to reconnect with his family. And it worked. He was now employed, living with his family again, rebuilding his life step by step. "You showed me it was possible," the letter said. "When I thought it was too late, you proved that it never is." Arthur kept that letter, along with many others, in a special box. On difficult days when the doubts crept back, he would read those letters and remember that his suffering had not been in vain. It had meaning. It had purpose. The community school continued to grow. Arthur trained other teachers, developed a curriculum, created partnerships with local musicians. Some of his students went on to prestigious conservatories. Others became teachers like him. They all carried the lesson he had learned the hard way. Music isn't just about notes and chords. It's about telling your truth, about connecting with others, about turning pain into beauty. 10 years after the show, At a dinner for Martha's 75th birthday, the whole family was gathered. Sarah with her husband and 2 children, James with his wife and daughter, Mrs. Gable, now in her 80s but still strong, Ryan, who had remained a close friend, some of Arthur's former students. At the end of the night, Arthur asked for everyone's attention and picked up his guitar. "I'd like to play a new song I wrote. It's for my wife, the woman who gave me a second chance when I didn't deserve one. The woman who taught me that forgiveness is possible, that love can survive even the worst mistakes." He began to play, and the room fell silent. The song was called 26 Years Later and told his complete story, from the fall to the redemption, from the pain to the healing. It wasn't just beautiful, it was true, and everyone in the room felt it. When he finished, Martha was crying. But they weren't tears of sadness, they were tears of gratitude. Gratitude for surviving the difficult years. Gratitude for the family they had rebuilt. Gratitude for a second chance that not everyone gets. "I love you," she said simply. "I love you too. I always have, and I always will." And surrounded by the family they had almost lost but managed to win back, they kissed, proving that true love isn't about never falling, but about getting up together every time you fall. Arthur's life didn't end as a perfect fairy tale. There were always scars, always reminders of lost years that could never be recovered. But there was also beauty in those scars. They told a story of survival, of transformation, of stubborn hope, even in the darkest moments. He kept teaching until he was 80 when he finally retired. Even then, he sometimes gave private lessons to special students, ones who reminded him of himself, lost young people looking for something to believe in. Martha and he spent their final years together, a simple but rich life. They had a morning coffee routine together every morning, afternoon walks, evenings playing music in the living room. They received frequent visits from their children and grandchildren, their home always full of laughter and love. When Arthur was 85 years old, he wrote his last song. It was called Thank You, and that was exactly what it was, a song of gratitude. Gratitude for the life he had lived, for the mistakes that taught him, for the people who forgave him, for the chance to do things differently. He sang it to Martha one night, the two of them sitting in the backyard under the stars. "Do you think we did the right thing?" he asked afterward. "Despite everything, do you think it was worth trying again?" Martha took his hand, those hands that had played so much guitar, that had trembled from drink, that had held her for so many years. "It was worth every second, every tear, every struggle, every moment of doubt. Because look where we've come. Look at what we've built. I wasted so much time." Don't think about that. Think about the time we had, the time we still have. And they did have more time. Not as much as they would have liked, because time is never enough. But enough to watch grandchildren grow, to celebrate 50 years of marriage, the second time around, to see the legacy they left through the hundreds of students Arthur taught. When Arthur finally passed away at 92, it was peacefully, at home, surrounded by the whole family. His last words were for Martha. "Thank you for letting me come back. Thank you for giving me a second chance." "Thank you for coming back," she replied, kissing his forehead. "Thank you for fighting to stay." The funeral was huge, not just family, but hundreds of former students, musicians he had inspired, people whose lives he had touched through his music and his story. Each one shared memories, sang his songs, celebrated a man who had fallen so low but risen again. Sarah, now herself in her 70s, gave the eulogy. "My father wasn't perfect," she began. "He made terrible mistakes. He caused deep pain. But he also showed that it's never too late to change. It's never too late to ask for forgiveness. It's never too late to try to be better." He spent 26 years on the streets, lost, but the 30 years that followed showed us what true redemption looks like. It's not about erasing the past. It's about building a better future despite it. Dad, thank you for coming back. Thank you for fighting. Thank you for teaching me that forgiveness, though difficult, is possible, and that family, even broken, can be mended if everyone is willing to try. After the funeral, the family gathered at the house Arthur and Martha had shared. James picked up his father's old guitar, the same one he had carried through the streets for so many years. "Should we donate this to a museum or something?" he suggested. "No," Martha said firmly. "This will go to little Arthur when he's old enough. Your father would have wanted it to stay in the family, making music, telling stories." And so it was. The guitar was passed to the grandson, who learned to play it, who composed his own songs, who continued the legacy Arthur had begun. Arthur's story continued to inspire long after his death. The show he had competed on occasionally rebroadcast his episodes, especially the one from the finale where Martha walked onto the stage and hugged him. It became one of the most iconic moments in American television. Music students studied his compositions, not because they were technically complex, but because they were emotionally honest. His songs about living on the streets, about losses and gains, about rebuilding broken families, resonated with people everywhere. But perhaps his greatest legacy was the community school. Even after his death, the program he had built continued strong. A new wing was built and named in his honor, with a plaque that read, "To Arthur Miller, who proved that music saves lives, and that it's never too late to come back home." Martha lived 5 more years after Arthur. They were difficult years without him, but she found comfort in the family they had built together, in the memories they made, in the certainty that when her time came, he would be waiting. When she finally passed, it was with a smile on her face, her last words being a song, the lullaby Arthur used to sing to Sarah so many years ago, the same one he had sung at the finale of the show, the same one that was now sung to every new great-grandchild that was born. The family carried on, generation after generation. And with every birth, someone would pick up that old guitar and play. And with every death, someone would tell the story of how Arthur lost himself and was found, of how a broken family was mended, of how it's never too late to start over. Because that was the lesson Arthur had learned and passed down. Life isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up. It's not about never making mistakes. It's about learning from them. It's not about perfection. It's about the constant effort to be better. And above all, it's about never giving up on the people we love, never giving up on ourselves, and believing that even the most broken stories can have beautiful endings if we're willing to fight for them. The streets where Arthur had walked for so many years still existed, but now occasionally someone would stop on a particular corner where he used to play, and if you stayed quiet enough, you could almost hear the echo of a guitar, of a raspy yet beautiful voice singing about stars he could finally see again, about homes he had finally returned to, about love that had survived everything. And maybe, just maybe, some other man or woman lost in the streets would hear that story and find the courage to try to come back home too. Because if Arthur made it, maybe they could too. This isn't just the story of a man who showed up on a talent show. It's a story of redemption, of forgiveness, of family, of second chances. It's the story that no matter how deep you fall, there's always a way back. There's always hope. And in the end, that hope is all we truly need. End of story. This was a fictional story created to touch our hearts. Now tell us what you thought. Do you believe it's possible to forgive such great wrongs? Have you been through something similar in your family? Share your opinion in the comments with sincere words. Thank you so much for your company. Don't forget to leave your like and especially subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other emotional stories.